Hi and welcome to another ink review. My name's Michael and today we're looking at another new Robert Oster signature ink. This is a really interesting one. This is Plum Nut. Now, Robert Oster, an Australian brand, is particularly well known for greens and blues and some really vibrant colours and shading and sheen and all these sorts of things. So this ink is a really nice addition to the lineup. It's a really interesting sort of browny-pink sort of colour, and it is what I consider to be a shading ink, as you'll see from a couple of the samples that I bring up. Now, Robert Oster is, as I said, Australian-made brand, using environmentally friendly bottles for their ink. They're 50ml bottles and they retail for about $17 depending on where you get them from. Now, I really like this brand and I really like the inks. I think they're really interesting colours and they're really well behaved. My only sort of thing about this brand is the bottles. While they're really great value, and I love the fact that they're environmentally friendly, zero carbon I think, they being that sort of tall shape is great for filling up your pen. It does sort of, you can fill it up quite deep into the bottle, but it does make them a little bit sort of unsteady if you're prone to knocking things over. So just something to be aware of. This ink isn't one of the sheening inks that Robert Oster is particularly well known for, things like Fire and Ice, or a couple of new inks like the River of Fire, which the review will be in the description. It's a new ink that I really like. But this is a really interesting, as I said, blue, browny-pink sort of colour. And as you can see from sort of the fake chromatography here, it's quite an interesting little mix of colours. I didn't expect there to be quite so much blue in this ink. When you see it on the page, it doesn't scream blue, but then again, it's got some interesting purples, so that blue does sort of show through. There's pinks all through the middle and then some nice sort of light reds at the top, giving it that sort of nice dusty sort of colour. Let's have a quick look at it in the writing samples. We'll start with the Rhodia 80-gram paper, and these were done with a Lamy Safari with a broad nib. As I said, Robert Oster signature ink Plum Nut. It is a really interesting sort of pinky, purpley brown sort of colour. There's some really interesting sort of shading that comes through, and even in the medium nib, it actually looks more saturated. It seems to pick up more of the darker purpley brown shades, and yet it still looks quite beautiful in the extra fine as well. You can see on the crosshatch there how interesting that shading actually can be, where you get some really beautiful sort of softer pinks and then those more purpley browns where the ink pools nicely, and it does look great in a flex. Really interesting colour. So let's look through the little test. Saturation, it's okay. It's not a highly saturated ink, but when it shades, it's got a beautiful purple that sort of comes through. The sheen is low. It's really not a sheening ink at all, but with that beautiful browny pink primary colour, it's really beautiful. Lubrication is fair. It's not the wettest ink I've ever used, but even by Robert Oster standards, this is a pretty wet ink. The dry time is fairly slow, 30 to 35 seconds on this paper, and as you'd expect with an ink that this is this sort of water saturated, the water resistance is quite low, really. The drip test removed most of the ink, and the swab, well, you can't read a thing, the number line there where the pass was. Cleaning is absolutely brilliant. It didn't stain at all, and it cleaned out of the pens I tried it in without any problem whatsoever. For bleeding and feathering, we'll look at some other papers as well, and we'll see how we go. So first paper we'll look at is the Tomahawk River. And it does look lighter on this paper, which is really interesting. I quite like that dusty sort of colour on this. You can see it's not a sheening ink. There's no sheen, but you do get. I put down a lot of ink to try and get it to sheen on this paper, but we just got some beautiful shadings. Those blues sort of started to come through quite nicely there. Dry time at 50 to 55 seconds is slow, but when it does dry, it looks beautiful. Actually, I tried this on Leuchtturm paper as well in my bullet journal, and the way the ink dried, where it pooled, was absolutely beautiful. This sort of beautiful flat matte brown, pinky brown with these purple sort of halo was just, that sort of purple halo was just absolutely beautiful. As you can see on the two higher end papers, it only bleeds where we put down a lot of ink. Otherwise, it's really clean. You can easily sort of use both sides of the paper with this ink without any problem whatsoever. Cheaper papers. Well, here's the Reflex standard copy paper. Dry time of 20 seconds. Some interesting shading. Sort of it's not quite as flat as it is on Tomoe River. The paper's a bit more absorbent, but also, you know, there's no bleed at all. It's really, really well behaved. The cheapest paper I tried it on was the Spyrex notebook, and yeah, super absorbent paper. Just ate it up. You get a really nice indication of that browny-pink there, and only spots of bleed. So the only bleeding you're going to get from this is where you put down a lot of ink on cheap absorbent paper. Otherwise, it's just going to work really well for you. So let's do the quick scoring. Colour, I've given a 4. I quite like this. It's not going to be to everyone's taste. I really do like it. It's certainly not an ink for professional use, unless you're putting it in a really wet pen, in which case you might have other issues. But it is a really nice sort of ink for, certainly for artwork, but also for sort of anything that you want to have a little bit of personality on the page. Particularly if you're using a wetter pen, you're going to get a bit more of the personality from this ink. Performance, I've given 4. Really well behaved on the paper. Cleaning is good. Water resistance is low, but you really don't buy Robert Oster inks for the water resistance. You buy them for these incredible colours that sort of show the Australian colour scheme, if you will. X Factor, I've given a 3. I really do like the shading, but it's not really enough to call it an X Factor. You know, when you think of, you know, River of Fire or Fire and Ice and those sorts of inks, or Tranquility, which have those bright pops of sheen, that's an X Factor. This shading, it's beautiful, but yeah, I've given that a 3. Value, as with all Robert Oster inks, is a 4. For this amount of ink in a 50ml bottle, you know, $17 is pretty good price, really, especially when you think that it's a smaller ink company, although growing by the day, and produced here in Australia, sort of boutique ink company. It's a really good value ink, and you'd certainly pay much more for some of the Japanese inks for the same size bottle. So that averages out to sort of a 3.5 or 3.75 for this ink, which is strange because I think it's a better ink than that score actually allows, but because it doesn't have something on my scoring sort of criteria that makes this ink really pop, or you know, sort of be a must-have ink, it has come down ever so slightly. But really, this is a 4 to a 4.5 ink in every other way. So yeah, I certainly recommend this, and I really recommend the brand. Robert Oster do great work. They're a lovely company, and they are socially conscious, which is really nice. They support charities, they support causes and all of that as well. So, and of course, having environmentally friendly bottles really is nice to see. So that was Robert Oster Signature Ink Plum Nut, a new ink that's just come out and is available from retailers internationally, and will be rolled out into more retailers, I have no doubt, in short time. If you like this video and found it helpful, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Hit the notifications button if you want to keep up to date with the videos that I produce. And please send me messages. Drop me a message either here on YouTube or at my blog, which will be linked in the description below. If you've got any pens or ink or any sort of stationery items that you'd particularly like me to look at, or if you've got any questions for me about what I do or about any of the products that I use, I'm happy to answer whatever I can. In the meantime, enjoy your pens, keep writing, and I'll see you later.